Welcome to Quilting the Kaye Wood Way. On today's show, I have a brand new project for you, and it's using a quarter quilt. What is a quarter quilt? You're just going to have to stay tuned, and I'll let you know. Welcome back. All right, what is a quarter quilt? Well, it takes quarter the fabric, quarter the time, quarter the money, and it's quarter the size. And what do we use it for? To decorate our beds. It's used to put over the bottom of the bed in the toe area, so you can just have one beautiful comforter on your bed and just change your quarter quilt with the seasons. Let's take a look at how we're going to do that. I have two different types here, depending on the way that you want your quarter quilt to look. I've included here some embroidery and applique for those of you that have embroidery machines. But you know, if you don't have one of those machines yet, and I always say yet because I think everybody wants one at least, I have one just using fabric. And I'll show you both techniques, and they both make great looking quarter quilts. All right, let's take a look here. This is a piece of fabric, printed fabric, and what I've done is I've used the View and Do octagon shape, 8 sides, and just cut around it to fussy cut the flower in the center. That's if you don't have the embroidery machine. If you do have the embroidery machine, let's take a look at what I have here. This is a real innovative technique, I think. It is 3-dimensional. You can lift up the pieces. They stick up from your quilt or your block. And how do we get that? Because that's not the traditional embroidery. Well, we've combined applique with embroidery stitches. And let me just show you what that looks like. It comes with pieces and patches. Look at this. We have different colors for different flowers. And you set your fabric in a hoop the way you would do any kind of embroidery on your sewing machine. And you proceed to put the program in, and you push the buttons, and it will just do a certain step, just a little bit of embroidery, tell you to add a piece of the pieces that are already pre-cut. It'll tell you which ones to add. It'll do a few more stitches, and pretty soon you have a design that is 3 embroidery, and you can build up your applique, and it's really neat. Okay, what are we going to do after we have all of this done? We're going to fussy cut it, and I want it in an octagon shape. You have to be really careful when your pieces go beyond our viewing area. We want to get it out of the way for 2 reasons. We don't want to cut it. That's disastrous after all your good work. But we also want the octagon shape to lay flat on the fabric. And so I'm going to center it. I don't want to get too close to the edge here, but that looks pretty good. And then I'm going to go ahead and cut it. And the View and Do octagon is made for a rotary cutter, so we'll just cut right around it. Go past the end of it so you don't have little corners that aren't cut through. That happens a lot. Okay, one more side. And here we go. Now we have, see there, one there. Okay. Here we have our octagon with our embroidery and our applique in the middle. What are we going to do now? Well, a technique that I learned quite a long time ago really adds something to my quilts, and it's not very noticeable, is what I call an accent strip. Let's go back here to my rose, and you'll notice the red strip. That's what I call an accent strip. And actually, in my different flowers, I have different colors. Here, if we go back to this flower, I've picked up and put a purple accent strip here, just to pick up the purple that's in the flower. All right, so how are we going to do an accent strip? Well, I take a 1-inch strip of fabric, and you can make it a long strip or shorter pieces, and I'm going to let my iron fold it for me. Okay, right here, I'm going to take this piece of 1 inch, fold it wrong sides together. This is a trick that will help you anytime you need to fold fabric. I'm going to let my pin do the work. So I'm putting, we'll do that first. Put the pin into your ironing board or mat. Slip the strip underneath it so it comes right up to the pin, and put the pin down just on the other side. It has to be loose but no play. And then using an iron, you can do this. If you're doing a binding strip, for instance, you could do this whole strip in just, a minute or two. You just need to pull it a little bit at a time till you get a tail. And then just pull it through. And it's folded in half and creased. And it's in shape for us to start using it. Now here I have a piece where I've added the accent strip to all the sides, and we're going to just do this. So I think it's time now to go over to the sewing machine, show you exactly how this will be done. On this particular piece, I've chosen a yellow accent strip because my flowers are yellow. And here we have the folded strip, and I'm just going to lay it right on here, and we'll sew this. And we're going to do it at less than 1/4 inch. And as I've mentioned before on TV, please don't email me and ask me what less than 1/4 inch is. I get so many of those. It's anything less than 1/4, that's it. If you think it has to be 1/8 inch, that's good. We're going to scissor it. And here we have our piece. And now we need to cut the ends. And since we have a perfect octagon here, if we just put the octagon shape on top of the octagon we've already made, we can use that to cut the ends of the accent strip. And here we have the accent strip finished on this particular piece. Now it's time for some borders on this block. And if you look here, you notice I've alternated black and gray borders. I'm going to start with a gray border and just take a long strip, and doesn't matter what side, but this is what we call a partial seam. And so you'll see what that means in a few minutes if you're not familiar with it. I'm just going to extend past this strip quite a bit, like about 2 inches. After you make a few of these, maybe you could get that down a little bit to save fabric. And I'm going to start stitching pretty much right in the center of where this strip will be. And we'll just sew to the end, scissor it to cut the threads, and we have what we call a partial seam. And this is sticking right out here. Now we need to press. Just take this, we need to press toward the strip, and we want to press on the right side of the fabric. So first of all, I'm going to press my strip and then press it toward the strip. So the seam allowances are going toward the strip. Don't worry at all about this piece right here. This end that's sewn down is the one that needs to be pressed. And then we're going to cut. And the way we're going to cut the ends of the strips is by using the Star Maker 8. Now, whenever I use the octagon shape, quite often I have to pull in the Star Maker 8 for angles, and they both have the 8 in them, and that's what it means. But I'm going to line this up with the octagon, the outsides of the Star Maker 8 with the outsides of the octagon. And I'm turning this upside down for a reason. And this is the best way I've found to do this. We want to mark where the fold or the seam line is between the strip and the accent strip, and line it on there carefully, because this will tell us as we go on in future steps if we're really accurate. Then I'll turn it over because I want that static sticker on the bottom so it doesn't move. I'm lining up the outside of the octagon with the Star Maker 8. We don't want any creases there. The static sticker is right on the seam line, and we're just going to cut the right side of this piece. We still want this tail out here in nowhere land. Now we'll go to a black piece for our next strip. And now we just have to extend past the gray. So we'll go and sew that. And I hope you use a 1/4 of an inch foot when you sew your patchwork, because it's really critical. I know some people like to use a regular foot and tell me they can judge a 1/4 of an inch foot. But you know, I like to be a little bit more accurate than just judging it. Just go past, scissor, again, press the seam allowance, just as you sewed it, and then use the iron to just come right across there. Now this time we'll be cutting the edges with the Star Maker 8 again, but we'll be cutting both edges. Let's get our gray strip out of there. And now we need to line this up with the outside edge right here. Let's finagle it a little bit. And you may want to move the static sticker. Well, maybe we can leave it right where it is. I'll just take a look and see. Okay, I've got it with the outside of this gray and the outside here of the yellow. And I'm going to continue my cut on both sides. And you can see how our border is building. Now I need to go to the gray. This time we don't need to overlap anything. We just have to be sure we cover the gray in the previous border. Make sure they're lined up. And stitch. I just love gadgets on machines like my scissors. It cuts the top and bottom thread at the same time, gets it ready to sew the next step. Okay. Again, we'll press. There we go. Press the seam allowance toward the strip. Take the Star Maker 8, line it up again with the outside of what we've already done. Now this time I do need to move that static sticker. I want it right on the seam line. And from now on, the rest of the whole strips around this first time, that should be right on the seam line. You know, I never used to do that, and I found that sometimes when, let's say the second strip I put on, let's say this gray one, turned out to be a little bit wider than the other strips, and I didn't know it until I was done, but this way it gives me the accuracy. Okay, and then we're going to just continue around until we have all of these strips added. And now what do we do with our partial seam? The first one that we did, well, we're going to go back and finish the seam now that the border is there underneath it. This way you can't tell which was your first strip that you added, because they all are the same size. There we go. Scissor. Again, we'll press that seam, and our first row of borders is finished as soon as we cut this. See now, as I said, it twirls and it twists, and you can't tell which of the border strips was the starting place. So now we'll go back again with the Star Maker 8. It's lined up on the seam line. And we'll cut this strip. There we go. And now our first strip is done. We continue the same way until we get our second strip done. And you can see how the colors just sort of twist and turn. When we start our second row of border strips, we need to do a partial seam again. And it gives it a very nice effect. Welcome back. Now let's take a look at our corners. I've cut a triangle here, and it's cut from a bias strip. And the reason that's important is we want the outside of our corners or the outside of our blocks on the straight of the grain. So by cutting this on the bias, that will happen. And I've made it a little larger than usual. I've talked to you about that before. Remember, everybody's seam allowance is a little bit different. So this is a way that we can take that into account and your corners will still fit. So I'm going to take this and sew it to one of my lighter strips. Line that up. We'll scissor it to cut our threads. Press away from the block toward the border, toward the corners. And now we can trim up our block by using the Star Maker 8 again in the corner. And I'm going to use static sticker. First I'll line it up, the outside of the Star Maker with the outside of the block. I want to mark where my seam line is so that when I go from corner to corner, that seam line, that mark is in the same place. And we'll just trim this corner off. And one corner of our block is finished. And the other corners are done exactly the same way. Now let's trim them up. We're going to bedazzle them. We're going to put jewels on them. Let's just bring our blocks in here and have some fun with our quilting. I have some crystals here. And these are pre-fused. When you buy them, they have the fusing already on them. And I have a pair of tweezers here. And that makes it easy to pick up these pieces. Oh, I got two that time. I only want one. We're going to put some red crystals on our flower here. We just place them in place with the glue side down, and taking a wand, I'm just going to push it straight down just for a second, and that will melt the glue, and that is on there to stay. Let's just give it one more shot here. There we go. And we'll put some more on, but you can just put as many on as you want to. They come in all different colors. We'll put one out here. And it really makes your wall hanging or your quarter quilt jump. You know, I haven't yet put any of these onto a full-size quilt, but I suppose they would work all right. I just like them on the smaller pieces. See here, it's stuck on there. That is going to stay there forever. It's washable. Let's put here a clear one out here. I have found what the clear ones do on the leaves is it looks like a dewdrop. Let's see what that looks like. You just get it. So you can just play till your heart's content. They come in all different colors, and they're called crystals, and they're just place them. Use a wand, a heating wand, to melt that glue. I'm not sure how the heat gets through that crystal to the bottom where the glue is, but it does, so I guess I don't have to know how that happens. Okay, let's put another clear one on this leaf too. And it just will make your wall hangings just sparkle. And they are washable. Once they're glued in place, you can wash your pieces. And I need another red one right here on my rose. This is something the kids could do too. Get them involved in your quilting. Let's get it turned over here. Oops, there, it turned. We'll just scoot it over here. But sometimes it's really fun to just bling up your quilts, I guess as the saying goes, and add some crystals to it. And now we have our embroidered applique, our three-dimensional look in our quarter quilt. And of course, as I talked before, if you don't have an embroidery machine, you can do this with just your printed fabric and have a really nice quarter quilt. So I hope you'll just jump in and try some crystals on your quilts, try some embroidery, or try some fussy cutting, and just have a good time making your quilts. And be sure and join me on another show. Thank you.